A lot of people in this room who feel strongly, and there are a lot of people in this room who feel strongly about different things and perhaps in different ways. When I decided to do this, one thing I did was I told some of my colleagues I would be doing this, and they gave me that look that they sometimes give me about how, well, eventually the child will learn. And then I stopped telling them because I don't like the look. But I'm doing this because I haven't learned, and I hope I never learn, and I hope we don't ever have a situation here in our district where I have the occasion to learn, because the thing that I'm supposed to have learned is that we can't talk about difficult and complicated and painful and contentious issues in a constructive, forward-looking way. And when we get to that place as a society, we have a very, very big problem. And so I'm holding this event tonight with, as a bit of a leap of faith, but as a leap of faith that I believe is justified because of the remarkably thoughtful communication I've had from so many people in this district about this issue. But I do want to just reiterate for everybody that it's a difficult issue, and it's a very, very, very emotional issue about which different people feel very different, strong emotions, right? There are people, and I think we all know there are people in this room who will say, look, I have been working in public employment for a long time. I was made a promise. I wasn't given a choice about whether to take that promise. That was just the deal. That deal involved the taking monthly of a bunch of my paycheck, maybe 9.4% for some of us, maybe 8% for others, 11.5% if you're me. Not only was I given that deal, but I was told two things. First, I was told the state would be essentially matching my contribution, if not more, and they didn't. And then I was told, to make it more frustrating, that that was not just a deal, but a constitutionally protected deal. How dare you touch that? There are people in this room who feel that way. I understand that, and I know that, and I cannot fault that. There are also people in this room, I suspect, who feel equally emotional in a somewhat different way. People who will say, my life has not been easy recently. Maybe I am trying without great ease to put my kid through college. And then maybe I discovered a few years ago that my retirement is gone, that I'll be working longer. Then somebody went and raised my taxes. And they did that to fund someone else's benefit, which I was never offered in the first place. And by the way, simultaneously they did that while cutting back on other government services, for example, funding of state universities, so that the tuition that I'm having trouble paying for my kid just went up a whole bunch. There are people, I suspect, in this room who feel that way and who aren't totally sure how they're going to hang on going forward either. And I hope it's clear from the way I present those 2 points of view that while they're, in some people's eyes, perhaps dogmatic, they're also real and legitimate. They're legitimate. They're legitimate challenges that people have been put through based upon the changing of assumptions that they thought were safe, and in the midst of an economic climate that has all of us jittery. And that makes conversations really hard. And so I just want to ask a few things in light of my firm belief that we can make this a constructive evening. The first is that I could name them actually. There are pairs of people in this room who, if you put them in a room together and asked them to talk about the question of public pensions in Illinois, couldn't avoid shouting at each other within 90 seconds, because so different are their points of view. That's fine. But please, as we speak to one another, let's make sure that we depersonalize our language and construct our our words in a tone of respect for one another. Not for me necessarily. I mean, I'm an elected official, I'm supposed to be able to take it, but for everybody else, it's important that we construct our comments in a tone of respect. Second of all, and maybe most importantly, part of what makes this conversation so hard is that different people bring really, 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 really different assumptions to it. Really different assumptions. That's just how things are when an issue is enormously multifaceted. That's okay too, but when you find yourselves making a comment, asking a question, I'd like you to make an effort to state the assumptions that you're making so that everybody knows where you're coming from, so that we understand what is the foundation upon which this question or comment is built. And last of all, let's just make sure that we do what we can to make sure that everything we say is as constructive as possible. There's a lot that can be said about this issue that serves to divide, and the division then serves to stagnate progress, and the stagnation then serves to exacerbate the problem, which in turn will make the eventual solution that much more painful. So let us make sure that the language we use with one another is as constructive as possible, just because that's the best way to make sure we get to the solution, which is of minimum pain and minimum harm to as many people as possible. The last thing I want to say is that it's really easy to view this issue as one side versus another side. And I get that on both sides, I understand, but I really want us to do all we can to reject that point of view. Not just because it makes the conversation funner, but because that's not the reality here. The reality here is that every single person, whether they are an employee of government or a payer for government or a recipient of services of government, and many of us are more than one or perhaps even all three of those things, needs the public sector to work efficiently, and to work in a reliable and functional manner. And this conversation is about making the public sector in the state of Illinois functional. So I get the frustration that people have with each other, with the other side, so to speak, but I don't come to this room on a side, and I don't come to this room recognizing really the legitimacy of the notion that there is a side, because I think once we come at it from that point of view, we're really guaranteeing ourselves to have a conversation that's not about how do we make the public sector as effective and efficient and reliable as it needs to be to deliver the services that our community relies upon at a cost that we can afford.